Hello and welcome to the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap. We have been away for a few weeks. I was over at AADA and then on holiday, and we've all been fairly busy, but we are back with a massive tranche of news to go through, spanning the last couple of weeks, though, mostly from the last week because it has been rather busy. Now, I apologise for the very weird camera angle. I had a bit of a technical issue at the last minute, so we're running through a different camera to what we normally do, and I don't seem to know how to set it properly. And we do seem to have a bit of background noise from a few of us today, so we're going to be hot on our mic buttons. And also, I think we'll remember, and this is a nudge to the guys, that we do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, a lot of stories to get through today. So perhaps let's keep our commentary succinct, but still cutting and insightful. Yes. How is everyone? Graham, you're rushing to get cars out the door for the clean car changes tomorrow?
Yeah, it's almost too late for that now, actually. That was sort of yesterday. Customers coming into the yard today, unless they can get their finance nailed down and everything paid out, or they turn up with a big wallet full of cash, it's pretty much too late now. I think that date's almost passed. But yes, it's been pretty busy logistics-wise, that's for sure.
Yeah. And David, how's retirement going?
Well, I spent a bit of money in the last 2 weeks, and I'm thinking I might have to go back and do a bit more work.
You're still in the old office, but I gather the MIA office has actually moved now. You're officially no longer in the MIA office.
That is correct. The MIA office moved, I think, about halfway through May. And so now this is just my company office, and I'm just doing a couple of reports and things for various people, but mostly I'm retired. It's just last Friday I bought a motorbike back off my brother. I sold to him 5 years ago, and I rode it from Copper down to Eastbourne in one day through quite torrential rain in places, but it was an interesting ride.
So when you say you're retired, if someone came waving around saying, do some consulting for me, you'd definitely say no?
I would. I might say yes. I might say no. It just depends on the circumstances. Whether I've got things coming up, how big a piece of work it is, and how easily it fits into my wheelhouse.
Oh, come on, David! Mm-hmm. Ka-ching! We're from the car industry. The register never stops rolling. You know it. I know it. We all know it.
No one's truly retired in the car industry. I remember when Perry Kerr retired, and he was off to sun himself in Australia, but all of a sudden he kept on popping up in these places working again. So no one truly retires. Right, now let's move on to the news. So I'm going to bring up the sheet for today, and what has been a fairly big story that we popped out to the market yesterday, and that is that we're running out of plates, or at least we seem to not have plates in the right place, seems to be the story that I'm starting to hear from out there. So busy dealers and distributors now appear to be running short of number plates in some places, as the deadline for getting cars registered prior to the change in the clean car discount come into play on Saturday morning. So of course the rebates go down and the fees go up of that day, and a whole pile of cars change. May not even get anything anymore. That we were getting something. Now we've heard reports that there are issues in some areas of the country where plate stocks are not matching demand. And in one region, concerns a large stockpile of plates were held aside for a single dealer group, something that is against policy. Another trader indicated it's even more than one trader now, indicating there's even a struggle to get plates in Auckland. Speaking to DriveSure Managing Director Greg Ranson, this was yesterday, of course, they've been running out on a regular basis but getting restocked on a semi-regular basis as well. So they were getting a stock in this morning that I'm sure Graham's got his nose onto. And they will be, I suspect he thinks they weren't going to last the day. MIA Chief Executive Amy Wiley, says the association had leaned on Wakatahi to ensure adequate supply of plates were available following issues when the clean car discount was introduced. They understand, and we've had semi-confirmation that the Wakatahi actually does have plenty of plates. The issue appears to be that agents simply have just been blown away by demand. That's tying into our interview with Greg Ranson in there, where he suggests that they surveyed all their customers about what they would need, and then they ordered more than that again, and they're still being kicked over it. They're just There's just so many more cars being processed than they expected. And then there appears to be a heck of a lot of work going on out there in the trade. We spoke to Auckland City Twitter, who are basically putting in all the work down to 10 o'clock every night to get a contingent of rental cars sold direct by Toyota out to the customer. Honda New Zealand directed a load of cars that were going to go to Nelson, to their distribution centre, to Auckland instead, and have been processing them in their transport operator's yard. So that's a massive effort by them, again, working big hours. Andrew Sims dealer, Principal Matthew Wells, saying they just had a massive week processing BYDs. It's not as crazy as anticipated, but it has been really busy. They're not sure it's going to be a record month, but it will be a solid month. Graham McDonald, how are you going out there in the field? I won't even read from the story. You're pretty busy.
Yeah, I started here in West Auckland. There'd been lots of talk about plates running out across West Auckland, and again, like you said in the story, I think they may be restocking, but the issue the trade's going to have is whether they can restock in time. And I accept from yesterday's concerns that we'd run out of plates in its entirety to understanding that there was a courier delivery away from licenses. The issue today is going to be whether the couriers can get the stuff on the ground in time. Because as I understand, there's no dispensation in the system for 1st of July plating. So, well, the courier didn't get the plates to my testing station on time. That's not an argument we can use. And so it'll all come down to logistics of getting plates on the ground. When we talked about, though, the numbers that were anticipated, don't forget there's been a huge inrush of vehicles. This is the imported trade anyway, a huge influx of vehicles on the ground coming into New Zealand in the last 2 or 3 weeks. We had a lot of vessels coming in at the last minute, some deferred, some early, but it meant that there's a huge number of vehicles now freshly hitting the ground, and a lot of those were purchased. In fact, I'd argue almost all of them were purchased prior to knowledge of the changes happening in the Clean Car Scheme for the 1st of July. So naturally, dealers had bought anticipating that would be a continuation through until later in the year, which it wasn't. And now they've got to try and do the best they can to maximise whatever they can before that rebate is either changed or lost altogether. Or in the case of a lot of vehicles, looking at the list here, a lot of them, we plated a lot of vehicles on Wednesday so that they didn't incur significant fees. And there's some pretty big numbers involved too. So could you have predicted this? Arguably, if you'd asked dealers 3 or 4 weeks ago, none would have had a clue because you just don't know what you're going to get your hands on at the right time to plate them. If you'd asked us on Monday, we would have said, look, you know what, we're just too busy to give you a number. Let us get back to you on that, and we're working it out for ourselves because stock changes so frequently. So Richard and I, you and I, going back on this one yesterday, sort of communications as to whose fault it actually was. I've come to the conclusion it's kind of no one's fault. It's just the result of what I consider to be a fairly ad hoc last minute decision from a regulator or from a government perspective that's come home to roost.
I'm going to extend it. Maybe there is a little bit of dealer blame in this, certainly on the used side, in that speaking to Ranson, he did survey people and he said a lot of them just didn't come back. And it's the old deal. Whenever there's a rule change go, particularly David Vince is always keen to say, speak to your agent, speak to the various people you work with. They're going to be your greatest partners getting through this kind of stuff. If your agent put out to you saying it's going to be busy, tell us what you need now, and you didn't answer, and you're struggling to get plates now, or you've gotten plates but your mate around the corner is struggling, then you're probably a little bit at fault. And I'm not saying that's the case everywhere, but perhaps in that situation it is. It sounds like Waikato made sure there were plenty of plates available. Sounds like plenty of agents bought in or stocked extra plates, forward-ordered extra plates. Whether you've communicated well enough or not to your agent is another. To your agency is another matter. Graham, I'm sure you've got a take on that.
Well, no offence to Greg, but we didn't get surveyed. But I've known for quite some time, a little spreadsheet here in front of me of all the vehicles we have in stock. But that's such a shifting target. What we had in stock on Friday last week is not necessarily what we have in stock this week. What we have coming through compliance, and our compliance centre made a Herculean effort to get as many vehicles through as possible. We were literally hand selecting the ones to go through the process that we knew might be required to be plated because they carried a hefty penalty. But all of this was happening so quickly. And to be fair, if somebody had asked me on a Monday morning and said, how many plates do you think you're going to need? I would have said, look, you know what, piss off. I'll get back to you when I know. I don't even know myself right now. I'm working on it. It is such a fluid situation.
Now, David, normally the new car industry seems to largely dodge this kind of stuff because, the PDI process is easier than, I guess, the compliance process to manage that kind of stuff. But I am hearing there are new car operators caught up with a shortage of plates. Central Otago is one area I understand there's a bit of an issue. Is this, is there anything more that could have been done, or is this just, just something that happened?
Well, some of the new vehicle distributors can issue plates that have an ability and agreement with the NZTA to issue their own plates, and so they are not caught by this. It's those that need to go through the same processes as everybody else to get hold of the plates. I'm with you, Richard. I've been around the block a few times. These things happen, and it's all a bit of planning. And I think for the new car sector, the changes came much shorter period than what we would have liked. But I think there was a long enough period, 6 weeks, to start planning. And if for the new vehicle sector, we could have anticipated two things. A rush on those vehicles that are going to have higher fees. And a rush on those vehicles that get a discount because the discount's going to be reduced. So right across the board, we would have expected to see activity tick up. Conversely, I'm also hearing that sales in certain sectors are very slow. For new vehicles, the economy is quite tough. The discretionary spending seems to have evaporated out of the market. So there's all sorts of push and pulls on this one. But I think for knowing this was coming for 6 weeks, there was an ability to plan. I think the issue is the hiccups in the supply chain. It's all the other bits. Graham's at the end of a supply process. So it's all the bits that go in between the plates being issued and getting them to the dealer that can be problematic, and that affects some of the new vehicle distributors too.
Yeah, I'm hearing all sorts of rumors in place. I understand there's one smaller brand that's been really badly hit simply by a ship that's going to miss the deadline by 3 days. I don't know the name of that, but I hear that's being talked around the place. It's certainly going to be interesting for some, and I'm sure plenty of people will still be busy today and queuing up at VINs and VTNZ and DriveShore and the post offices around the country getting some plates to get stuff plated so there is not money left on the table. Now that sets up a whole pile of other arguments around what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. That's another interesting one. Anyway, let's move on to the next story, and that is, and I feel like this one's a little bit beltway because it's someone who's close to us, but we'll shove it up early in the stream anyway. And that is Ewan Philpott departing the Optimus Group. So Jivic Chief Executive and Chairman of VINs, Ewan Philpott, has resigned from those roles. Well known regarding the trade, Philpott has led the border inspection arm of the Optimus Group since 2003, taking the directorship and chairman's role of VINs when the listed Japanese firm purchased it in 2013. The news came letter to customers from Jivic President Managing Director Kaneyoshi Akita. Dear clients, Ewan Philpott has tendered his resignation and will step down as Director CEO of Jivic NZ and Director of Vehicle Inspection New Zealand effective July 14, 2023. Philpott has a long history in the trade, entering the trade alongside former VIA Chairman Graham McDonald at Turner's Auctions, ultimately rising to managing its damaged vehicle division. He's played a large role with the import trade over the years. And of course, took Jivic into the United Kingdom and Australia. Very well regarded for his work on regulation and government, and plenty of other activities out there for him. So I've tried to have a chat with Ewan. Unfortunately, he is not allowed to really talk as such, but understand that he is going to remain in the trade, which is excellent because I think he's a talent that we don't really want to lose off to some other industry that holds such a wealth of information.
Yeah, I can't echo that stronger, Richard. I mean, as you pointed out, Ewan and I entered the industry, but at the same time, myself in 1989, I think Ewan came on board in either 89 or 90 at the old. We were selling salvage, and there's nothing like training for the industry being dumped upside down in the deep end, selling wrecked, smashed up cars to wreckers. It's like baptism by fire, and
and some dodgier dealers.
oh, yeah, I would be still finding a shallow grave in the backyard if I told some of the stories and things that we knew. At any rate, so as a training ground, it was fantastic. But Ewan and I have worked closely together by circumstance over a number of different years through my tenure at VIA as on the board and then as chairman. And then more latterly working in Australia, Ewan was one of the founding members of AIMVIA when we got that back up and going, I suppose, in 2013, 2014. Ewan was on board as well. I tell you what, I'm glad Ewan is on our side of the fence, because if he was a regulator or a bureaucrat as an industry, we'd be in trouble. He's the consummate operator that is across and on top of almost everything that's going on around him, even the things you didn't know that you need to be on top of. And Ewan's just one of those people that can absorb the information, identify it, pull out the key points, put them back out, the things that needed to be done, and express himself well and in a fashion that gets people on board to do things. And he's a very rare talent indeed. And I think single-handedly has been responsible for a lot of the good things that have happened in the biosecurity and inspection field in New Zealand. As a leader in that field, it'd be arguable to say that there's not a lot of people that know more about it than Ewan does. So yeah, he's a huge loss, and I'm sure that he'll pop back up in the industry using either some of or all of those talents in the near future.
David, have you had to face Ewan across the table in Wellington at some point?
Yeah, it wasn't very long in my role when I was first appointed General Manager of Land Transport Safety Environment at the Ministry way back in 2005. Ewan and Gordon Shaw and trying to remember who else came and visited and introduced themselves, and so that was the start of a long and productive liaison. And I've had a bit to do with him over the years, and I did reach out to him yesterday, and we had an exchange of texts and emails. So yeah, I mean, it's certainly a change. He does want to remain in the industry. So I guess, when things progress a little bit more, he'll pop up and make himself known. But I agree with Graham. He's a knowledgeable person. And the thing that I like about Ewan is he's always approachable. He's always got a very good manner about him, and he puts people at ease. And that in itself is a rare talent.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, lovely bloke, one of the nicest in the trade. Well regarded for his community work too. Lovely wife and family. So, yeah. Hopefully we'll see him around. If not, he has a family property up near where I live up in Mangawhai, and we catch up occasionally for a beer up here. So no doubt that will happen as well. Now on to one that, David, I'm just going to chuck this mic at you before we even go too far at this. I'll put it on the screen and I'll just let you go, because it's unbelievable that this happened. And go.
Well, goodness. Speechless to start off with. Not often I'm sort of sit there and thinking, what the heck has just happened? Where did he not learn to read the tea leaves in the cup about responsibility? Is this just entitlement? And then it gets worse, because now look well, I'll be very careful with my words here. We have another Minister of Transport who had previously been a Minister for Climate Change issues and was all over the transport portfolio from that perspective, who was well known back in the day as being a chief policy advisor rather than a minister. It created a whole new range of issues. What a last few weeks. I just, I would never have expected.
For those that are listening on the podcast, we're talking about Transport Minister Michael Wood being told 100 frickin' times to sell shares that conflicted with his job as minister, and him utterly failing to do so, and then apparently probably not even really being entirely clear to people as to what he was doing, and then resigning and being replaced as Transport Minister by David Parker. Who as you're saying, David, interesting character as well.
Yeah, and look, the declaration about shares and what shares you have is not hard. And I've been on a number of advisory boards, and when I went from being a beneficiary to being a trustee of the trust that I was a beneficiary from, I had to actually get off my backside and discover what shares were in that trust that I was now had a duty for, and declare those as a conflict of interest. But it was a bit painful at the time, but it was only a couple of hours work. You just got to get around to do it, and if you don't, what does it say about you?
It's a pretty spectacular fall from grace. Yeah, well, we spoke about this. In fact, our last show that we had, actually, episode 56, I think at that point in time, we were somewhat making apologies for the fact that he could have forgotten and maybe he should have taken a bit longer, a shorter time to do it. And, and here we are now. Somebody on the radio said yesterday, they said pretty much every call poor old Chris Hipkins has made to back a minister has turned into custard. And I think today he's looking across his shoulder at Kerry Allen going, oh, no, God, not again. Please, no, God.
Who, of course, Kerry Allen is also Associate Transport, I think, as well, isn't she?
Oh, have they got to be? I mean, does this thinking before? Phil Twyford, what's he doing at the moment? Has he got a job? He could be a good transport minister, fill-in. It is incredible, isn't it? It really is. But the concern is David Parker and David Crawford there in my screen there. I'm sure you and David Vincent had a very testy exchange with him a number of years ago. I think you were in the room at the same time at the Beehive, where you saw the temper of Parker at work and the way that he treated his officials. If David Vincent has told the story, he can probably tell it better than I can. Perhaps you can too. But that story stuck in my head about if you want to judge a man on his behaviour towards the people that he works with and works for, it didn't look like it smelled of roses to me. And here he is, back in charge.
So you've got David Parker, not known for that, in the lead role. You've got Kerry Allen, who's having her own issues in the sport role. I was kind of hoping that we would actually get Kieran McNulty because he was in the acting role and he seems a bit of a stable pair of hands, but I suspect he's now Mr. Fix-It and he's got a million other things to deal with. He's probably going to take Kerry Allen's job in about 24 hours. So, yeah, a bit of a tricky one there.
Yeah, look, I have had a fairly colourful background with David Parker, but let me say I've never found David Parker to be unpleasant as in rude. I found him difficult to work with, and when I was a general manager at the ministry, and I led for that 3 years in that Labor government, 2005 to 8. I was the chief policy person for the Transport Climate Change work program. And it was at a time when a lot of changes needed to be made, but we didn't have the technology to make them. And he didn't like the answers that we came up with. And what's in New Zealand's best interest? What can be done? This is what the data says. And we kept on saying, look, let's do it unless it's a good idea not to. And he kept hearing of it, let's not do it unless it's a good idea. So he thought we were saying no. So we actually stopped transport officials from coming to his weekly climate change meeting with officials for the whole of government climate change program. So here was I, the chief policy advisor, the lead for all of government on transport climate change, not able to go to his meetings. It was a fairly farcical issue at the time. But I think he's mellowed over the years, but he's still very enthusiastic. He still has some quite strong demands, but he's only going to be in the role for a few weeks. And then we've got a whole new ball game come the election.
Did they keep the wheels on? How many weeks is it till Parliament rises? It's only a matter of weeks now, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe end of July.
Yeah. So I mean, you reckon they can keep the wheels on long enough to push the cart down the road to the cessation rising of Parliament?
Well, there's a few mechanical things that will keep going, but I think the big issue, and Richard's just touched on it, is poor old Chris Hipkins having to defend yet another minister. Mm-hmm. So the wheels are coming off Labour's cart, as it were, through ministers being perhaps a little bit too vigorous in their work. That's a very polite way of saying, exceptionally demanding and a bit grumpy at times.
Yeah, because I could paraphrase that for you if you like, David, but I probably won't. We're on a family show after all.
Here's a question: is that what if? Because when was it that we had the announcement of the clean car changes? Late mid-May, late May,
Mid-May.
mid-May.
Yeah, we didn't get 2 months, did we? 6 weeks.
What would have happened if this share stuff had come out 2 months ago, say mid-April? Would the changes have been kind of kicked into touch?
I don't think so, because the finance
money was
minister,
running out.
the money was running out, and the finance minister was saying, "You've got to do something." Officials had this on the back burner until January, when they suddenly thought, "Oh, August to December, we've sold a lot more. Oh dear, the fund's running out. Actually, we're in the crap." So that's what's driven it. They would have done the changes out of sheer necessity, and they'd actually agreed the changes end of March. Just didn't tell us till halfway through May. That's the big sin in all of this.
Now, while we have some hopefully some government officials listening into this, because we're talking about them, and they usually do, because when we do, I hear back something out of Wellington from someone. I'm going to have a very quick rant about roads. Totally aside to this, very quick rant about roads. Now, while I was away, the northern extension of the motorway up to Warkworth opened, and it is fantastic. Road of national significance. I believe we're still sitting on no fatalities on the Road of National Significance program. Started off by National. This was pretty much all set and funded before the Labor government got into place. And all they've really done is not cancelled it, but they did cancel the second half of it. Probably we were being punished for voting Winston out at the time, was my suspicion. Now, they're still kind of umming and ahhing over the extension of the motorway up to Wellsford and on to Tahana, which is pretty close to where I live. Now, whoever's sitting there down in Wellington, you need to get it done. It is ridiculous, the situation up in Northland at the moment. The Dome was closed. The Dome is basically State Highway 1 to Northland, so connecting multiple large towns and a substantial city of Whangarei and the port apparently you want to shift a lot of Auckland stuff to, for 3 days. 3 days of the main route north out of Auckland closed because of a road that was cancelled at the start of this government term. It was not cancelled, but not finalised. Get it done. The numbers work. Put a frickin' toll on it. No one in Northland really cares. We just want that road, because at the moment I'm cancelling stuff because we can't really reliably get to the city. I looked at the numbers on it the other day. It would save 17 lives over 5 years. 17 lives over 5 years. Just get it frickin' done. Anyway, that's...
There's a voting process occurring in October for something. I think, Rich, that might have a fairly big influence on that particular pathway forward, mightn't it?
I'm not sure that National's committed to doing it, to re-kicking it off yet either. So
I'll bet they're watching that one very carefully indeed. And we're talking about reading tea leaves. I'd like to think that they're a bit better at reading tea leaves than possibly that we give them credit for.
The thing that National needs to watch is that their competition in Northland isn't. I don't think it's necessarily going to be Labour this time. It's going to be New Zealand First. The chance of Willow Jean Prime, who's been our MP for the last 3 years, who basically doesn't seem to actually do anything, is yeah, exactly. And whoever basically promises to finish that road will win the Northland seat. And it is a swing seat. It's a seat that bounces backwards and forwards. So
there's a wider issue.
Also noticed they stopped calling it the Holiday Highway, and actually Hipkins made an apology for that at the opening for it being, because it was a Labor mantra, the Holiday Highway.
Public rants about that.
There's a wider issue here, guys. And think about Mayor Wayne Brown wanting to close the car trade from Auckland and shift it. Well, my position has always been clear. You don't want to take it further away to Northland, away from your population base. But even if you did, you can't do it until you've got the infrastructure in place to support it. And that link, that state highway link is a weak link. It's probably the weakest link in the country. And so They've got to think what's in New Zealand's best interest here around efficiency, lowering the cost of accidents and fatalities, and also saving fuel. We also know that roads of national significance, you drive smoother, there's less stop-start, and there's less fuel used on them.
Yeah. They've done some fixes on the last few years. When they cancelled the progress on the other motorway, the Labor government pitched a couple $100 million basically to do upgrades to the dome and put wire barriers down the middle, blah, blah, blah. All those upgrades did was made the slips worse, and then meant that every time there's a slip, no one can actually get around it because there's a giant wire rope up the middle. And that couple $100 million or whatever it was could have been spent towards starting off on the next motorway. I don't think the changes really saved that many lives. So it was a dumb move that was politically motivated, and they need to get on with it. Right, we need to get on because we are, I think, half an hour in and we're only through the first 3 stories. So let's move quicker from here. So adding to... Right. Twitter confirms Hilux hybrid arrival in Q1 2024. Twitter New Zealand has confirmed the introduction of a Hilux hybrid in the first quarter of 2024. The company says the Hilux hybrid is a key element of its decarbonisation plans. Twitter New Zealand said it wants to reduce tailpipe carbon emissions from its portfolio of cars, utes and vans by a minimum of 46%. It says the introduction of a hybrid into the ute category will move the dial to reaching the target and meet the needs of Hilux drivers around the country. Neeraj Lala said that while he can't reveal too details of the Hilux hybrid just yet, it will have a significant impact in the ute category, the largest segment of the local car and light commercial segment. The hybrid Hilux will be an important addition to our range and will enable any tradies, farmers and businesses to reduce their carbon footprints. Now, this is an interesting one in that I suspect that this vehicle was part of some of the confusion around when the start of the Clean Car Standard came in about there being a electric hybrid or electric Hilux or whatever on the way. But there's some interesting things about this vehicle in that in Australia they're not actually calling it a hybrid because it's a very, 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 very mild hybrid. It's a 48 volt integrated motor boost kind of system. They're only offering it in Australia on higher levels of vehicles. Only reduces emissions by about 10 to 15% so far we're hearing. We may not be able to, we haven't confirmed that yet, and Twitter may get a different variant of what they're hearing about in Australia. But interesting to see it's coming along. We're seeing the new Triton later this month, and the new Triton's likely to come with a plug-in hybrid option. We're still hearing rumours of a Ford Ranger plug-in hybrid option coming through, though we're also hearing rumours that they could just jump to electric. Good to see progress forward, David.
Let me chime in here. I'm going to say a few things that are likely to land me in trouble. It's not a hybrid. I'm sorry, mild hybrids I don't call hybrids. It is a mild hybrid, and I'm going to get in trouble here, but it's not pure ICE, that is true. And I think this is not the vehicle that caused the confusion back when this first came in. Mild hybrids are something you can do to an existing drivetrain to put in and start the journey towards hybridization. So it's an initial step, and good on Toyota for doing it. But it's 8 to 10% reduction in fuel at best, compared to a strong hybrid, which generally gets you 30 to 40% reduction and even slightly higher in certain driving conditions. So the electrification, this just still illustrates the challenge and the difficulty of the main brands bringing in a viable option. And I don't think we will see any viable options until 2024. And I think, and that's the year that I said they would start to come in. I think we will see some quite interesting options from both China and Japan manufacturers. The full electric side of it has still got some issues, and I think as the battery technology improves, we'll get there. But the issue for full electrification of light commercial utes is you run the risk of turning them into heavy commercial utes as they get over the 3.5 ton weight, which begs the question as to whether 3.5 tons is the adequate break point between light and heavy.
Yeah, we've discussed this before. That does need to be reviewed. We know BYD's got an electric ute, or at least a plug-in hybrid ute first coming. The interesting thing with the Hilux is that Twitter does have a hybrid drivetrain for a pickup truck now, and that the Hilux's sister vehicle, it's not entirely the same, but the Tacoma in the US has been launched with a very substantial proper hybrid system, very similar to what's going into some of the Lexus models now. Whether that's too expensive, whether they figured that drivers in New Zealand wouldn't want a petrol drivetrain, even if it is a very efficient petrol drivetrain. That is, I guess, answers questions that Todd need to answer as opposed to us pontificating here. Yeah, it's certainly interesting. Now, another one that Dave is going to want to have a bit of a say on, I'm sure, is oh, look, I've accidentally stopped sharing the screen. Where are we? There we go. Work needed on vehicle emission standards from both the MIA and VIA. So we've seen the submissions to the government over the emission standards process today. Both parties really saying, particularly the MIA, saying New Zealand should be a close follower of Australia in mandating Euro 6 standards. So says the Motor Industry Association, adding the likely cost and impact to the industry, business and consumers outweigh the benefits of mandating Euro 6 ahead of Australia, particularly when the timing difference is likely months and not years. For existing auto vehicles in New Zealand's fleet, the MIA supports and encourages the urgent development of strategy and policy actions to help improve air quality and current emissions here. For used light vehicles about to enter New Zealand fleet, the association supports lifting standards from Euro 4 to Euro 5, but does not support the inclusion of Japan 2005 low harm from 2024 instead of recommending Japan 2018 be adopted earlier. Now, I guess the thing on this is, are we in this usual position where the government suggests something that's too hard and the industry goes back and says, no, you can't do it, and then you end up somewhere in the middle? Or are we in this new phase where the government seems to propose something too hard and then just do it anyway?
Yeah, well, the jury's out on that until we see the final product. The challenge for the new vehicle sector was we didn't quite know Australia's timeline until very recently, and then we understand that there's a set of recommendations from the Australian Department of Transport to the Minister recommending adoption of Euro 6D for new models by July 2025, which is only 4 or 5 months after when this rule amendment proposed has. So given that, and given the cost that we would face in not having certain models and other options, in the overall scheme of things, you think about what's in the country's best interest, keeping costs reasonable to consumers, mapping a pathway towards cleaner air, then those few months are not going to make a huge difference. The thing that the new vehicle sector has been really clear about is, please don't force the parent companies to divert R&D away from electrification back to Euro 6D as a special case, because electrification is your fastest way to improving air quality. And in the new vehicle sector, if you want a strategy for cleaner air, the strategy is do everything possible to keep the electrification rates going and bring as a tail end your emission standards up. Now, that's not an option that New Zealand could afford or had afforded in 2006 when the first emissions rule was brought in, and in 2012 when it was further amended. The only options available to the country at that time was emission standards. That's not the case anymore. The best option is electrification and bring emissions behind it to complement it. That's an analysis that I don't think officials have fully grasped. And I think the submission that Amy and Mark put together for the new vehicle sector is an excellent submission, and they've made a really strong case. And I can only encourage officials and the Minister Parker, to have a good look at it and make some decisions that I think are sustainable in terms of the rate of change, the ability, without decreasing consumer utility, while all the time bringing improvements to air quality.
Graham, from the used side, are you guys a little bit concerned about what's happening here, or?
Yeah, and these are not fields where I'm a specialist, and so I'm speaking a little bit ad hoc here. But so VIA, I put together a very good submission and an excellent presentation in how that was outlined to the industry a few weeks ago. Another series of webinars as well. And it's funny enough, actually, we're dealing with a similar issue in Australia right now with how officials view both the test cycles or the test methodology for vehicles in Japan and the standards to which those test cycles are applied. I think that's the best way of putting it. So I've had a bit to do there. and how that is now happening in New Zealand, the information we've been provided in New Zealand and how that translates back to Australia, it's kind of quite a fluid situation. Anyway, all that aside, the used industry, we're always accused, I think, of just wanting to bring in the cheapest, shittiest cars possible and be damned the consumer. And it's interesting at the moment that I think the used industry has matured a lot in the last, particularly 10 years, I'm going to say in terms of its view towards responsibility, both for environmental responsibility, for financial responsibility. Yes, there's always going to be rat bags at the tail end of things, but I'd argue and say there's some dubious new vehicle players there as well. That's the nature of industry. But it's always got to be, I suppose, compatible with the markets that we work with, both in terms of the sale of vehicles in New Zealand and the supply chains that we have. In New Zealand, our supply chain is primarily Japan, and we have to make sure that regulation doesn't impact to a point where we're unable to source adequate vehicles from Japan to supply the needs of New Zealanders here. Conversely, in New Zealand, we've seen the FOB value of what we're importing and the, if you like, the average value that consumers are currently prepared to pay come down considerably. And it's nothing to do with vehicle standards or safety. It's everything to do with affordability. And again, we have to be careful to make sure that regulation doesn't have the unintended consequence of denying consumers the graduated steps they need to regularly update on an affordable basis their vehicles, because that's the key to it. You want people, like David says, you want people to be moving up in what they're purchasing in terms of standard, environmental performance. You want to increase that all the way through. But if you get those steps, the ladder steps too wide apart, people can't make that jump. And that's, I think, one of the fears around the current proposals for these changes to the exhaust emission rule. And so your first point you made is, I think option C is probably what they're going to try and do, which is just to hell with the horses and do it. But option B, where the industry sits down, everyone puts their big boy pants on and says, okay, we can't do this. We don't want to do that. Let's find a compromise that provides that pathway, the graduated scale up all the way through. Will it happen? I don't think so.
Right. Well, we will see. We will see. Will this one get signed off under the current government, or is this going to get pushed over to the next term?
There's precedent for rules to be consulted on and processed through while elections happen, but the rule needs to be signed off by a minister because it's the minister's rule, not officials' rules. So it needs to be done before the House rises. And my understanding is that officials wanted to get it done before the House rises. But they need to make it a meaningful process.
Rush regulation is never good regulation.
Well, it was a 9-day submission period, 12-day submission period. It was crazy.
No, for the emissions rule, this one, no, it was 6 weeks. They actually did give industry a decent time to consult, and I think the issue here though, is to what extent will they listen to us? What extent will this be meaningful? And I think, at least for the new car sector, because I haven't taken the time, Graham, to have a look at what the used car guys have said, but I have for the new vehicle sector. I think they've mapped a plan and a strategy forward that is a really excellent pragmatic strategy. And the new car sector has always said, yeah, look, we want to do it. It's always a matter of timing and how can we do it that effectively keeps it happening without these massive disruptions, particularly given everything else that's happening.
Right, let's run through some more news because we're hitting the 45-minute mark. Right, if I put this on. So this happened well. Amusingly, we were over in Australia with Autogram at AADA. Trade-Me invests in Autogram. Trade-Me has taken a 51% stake in vehicle software business Autogram NZ. Autogram was founded in Australia in 2020 and launched in New Zealand in April 2022, offering comprehensive live vehicle valuations to help dealers, finance and insurance companies. This partnership will enable dealers and MotorWeb customers to leverage live market data to accurately value vehicles in New Zealand, says Trade-Me Motors Sales Director Jamie Fuller. Now, that one is interesting just because I guess one of my big learnings out of AADA, and we'll get to AADA a little bit later, was it's all about data these days. It's you've got to know what the numbers are to sell cars, apparently, certainly for the new car guys. And Trade-Me seems to be continuing to mop up or sign partnerships with anyone who has data. So I guess that is a bit of a smart move. Move on to the next one. Dealers need to update vehicle info by July 15. So you have 2 weeks left. Clean car discount data displayed on vehicle emissions and energy economy labels and online sales listings must be updated to reflect the changes and provide the correct information to consumers. Dealers are advised from July 1, dealers need to remove and replace existing labels with new labels, which will display the updated fees and rebates to consumers. A highlighted tick box symbol will appear on all labels printed from July 1 to differentiate between the current and new label versions. Have you been around the yard and changed the labels, Graham?
Well, you can't. You can't till the 1st of July. So, no, I haven't.
Oh, okay. Will you be doing it tomorrow?
I don't know about tomorrow. I've got many things to do tomorrow too. So there's a 2-week window for a reason. And first of all, I'd quite like the people that invent these regulations to come along and pay my printer bill, because that'd be quite nice if they did. Thank you very much. But they don't. So yeah, I think within, I hope, the course of the week, we'll have everything changed, if not sooner. But it's quite a fine process with the used sector anyway, because every vehicle differs slightly. You do have to check really carefully the information you're putting out there. And it's not just that, it's your marketing. If you include your rebates or your fees in your marketing process, particularly so we run a bespoke marketing process, for example. So we actually individually create a listing and information for every single vehicle. We don't just have a sort of a block one size fits all, which means you've actually got to go through and modify every single listing you have out there in the marketplace and ensure it's correct. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do. So I think the 2-week period of grace, I was initially really fearful that it would be a case of, right, that's it, 1st of July, get it done. By the close of business 1st of July, you should have it all done, away you go. And I'm glad to see that they've given us a 2-week grace period before the inspectors come knocking.
One of the things the new vehicle sector has advised officials is that when you make a change like this, generally speaking, it takes 2 to 3 months to change all of the marketing and all of the profiles, all of the printing, because it's not just simply the labels on the car, it's everything else that goes with it. So you have obligations under the Consumer Act, the Fair Trading Act, to ensure the information is correct, whether it's in digital format or in print form. So it's no mean feat to make this change. And 6 weeks was just, quite frankly, too short for this reason alone. So the 2-week grace period is, I think, is helpful, but it's a huge operation.
Let's talk briefly about marketing. And Dave, you might have a take on this one. I had a wee nudge to Ford New Zealand this week. They've been doing marketing on social media, and MG New Zealand had been guilty of this recently as well. We may have previously discussed it, where they posted up these ads on social media saying that the Mustang Mach-E GT could go from Auckland to Levin on one charge. The Mustang, Graham. Can your Mustang get from Auckland to Levin on one tank? I think he's deliberately kept himself muted there. Unmute yourself, Graham. Unmute yourself. Let me see if I can do it.
Sorry. My mouse had a hiccup at the same time. Tech. I got from Wellington to Auckland in my Mustang with fuel in the tank left over.
Nice. Anyway, the problem with those the problem with those ads is that no, the Mach-E really can't do that. Maybe if you're really careful and drove at about 40 kilometers an hour. But you got a big, they're basically relying on the WLTP rating and measuring how far that is going to go down the country, ignoring the fact you've got a giant mountain range in the middle. The continuing issues of electric vehicle missell in New Zealand carry on, and I thought we'd kind of dealt with this with used car dealers through the tribunal, but the new car manufacturers who are relatively new to EV, they're doing it too. So
the Commerce Commission is keeping an eye on this, and so here is a warning for all in the trade.
Yeah.
Be very, very careful about how you promote this and how you go about displaying information, because it is incredibly easy to mislead. And the Commerce Commission has already thrown a shot across the bows of the new vehicle sector by saying it's going to have a look at the WLTP and other claims as to what they can actually achieve in the real world. And of course, as we all know, it doesn't matter whether it's petrol or electric. A lot of this also depends on how you drive and how much weight you have in the car, the number of people, whether it's fine or wet or windy, how strong a headwind or how good a tailwind. So making bold claims, I think, is foolish behaviour.
Yes, well, interestingly, after I noted that to Ford New Zealand's comms teams. Those ads no longer appear to be online, so hopefully they took some guidance, and that's the reason behind that. Now, an interesting one here that I certainly have an opinion on. NZAI is changing its name to, or has changed its name to Too Cheap Cars Group. New Zealand Automotive Investments Limited, the company that just keeps on supplying my stories for me, will officially change its name to Too Cheap Cars Group Limited. The NZX was reserved the ticker code 2CC for use by the renamed company. I don't love cricket, yes. Too Cheap Cars is the market leader in affordable cars. We have 135,000 plus followers on social media, and we're focused about what we do, Chief Executive Paul Millward says. The brand is about giving New Zealanders a better deal every day, blah, 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 blah. This is a very telling, or arguably stupid move from a company that seems to want to do a whole pile of interesting things. The great thing about the old NZAI name when it came to listing was that it kept NZAI a little bit from some of the bullshit around Too Cheap Cars. It also meant the company had the potential, if it actually did really well, to go and invest in other things like new car dealers, all that other kind of stuff. Well, you're not going to go and see Too Cheap Cars Group buying new car dealerships, not with that name. And I also wonder why they would do that when there's still confusion between Too Cheap Cars and Kiwi Cheap Cars. I think, Graham, you have an interesting bit of West Auckland observation about that one.
Well, it's not West Auckland observation. There's actually New Zealand cheap cars, and I'm sure
New Zealand cheap cars. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, no, I'm sure Eugene watches this show with interest. But I happen to note that there was a site in fact, the site across in North Auckland in Wairau Valley. The Too Cheap Cars site now has its next door neighbour is going to be New Zealand cheap cars, and we are talking not just next door; they share the same driveway. Interesting times indeed coming there. So, yeah, I agree, Richard. I wonder if it was the right time to be putting all your eggs into the Too Cheap Cars bucket at a time with a bit of diversification might actually be helpful.
Yes, and just what we're talking about listed companies, both Too Cheap Cars Group Limited, or whatever the heck of it is now, I don't know what it'll be next week, and Turner's both posted fairly strong results for the last year. They're both still forecasting things might get a little bit iffy with the recession and so forth, but then it sounds like we're hearing economic indicators showing the recession might not even actually get that bad. So who knows? Back to some fun politics that will keep relatively short, and it did pop up while we were away. And where are we? National leader may have claimed CCD rebate on Tesla. News Hub suggests Christopher Luxon's family recently upgraded to a Tesla Model Y and appears to have claimed the clean car discount on it. The Luxon be under pressure to reveal whether he accessed the subsidy to buy a Tesla Model 3. News Hub alleges, saying he previously revealed his ownership of the Model 3 on both AM and 3 7 days, but backtracked and said his wife owned a Tesla, not him. News Hub has confirmed the family no longer owns the Model 3 and has upgraded to a Model Y. The CCD website says a rebate application has already been received for the EV. Now, this
good on him.
Exactly. Well, yes, good on him. And there's a second part to this, of course, in that Luxon wants EV drivers to pay RUC, which I'm also, even though I'm an EV driver, I think that needs to happen as well at some point. The funny thing about this one was that he basically initially acted like he didn't own the cars, and at one point he was saying, well, I don't really know, these are my wife's cars. Well, I call bullshit on that. I mean, that's just dumb saying that, because he knows full well what's going on in his own house.
This is where I think, as a politician, he's got it wrong. He should have just done a John Key and claimed it and owned it. The best example I can give is Gareth Morgan saying that we can tax rich people more, and so then you ask him how much tax does he pay, and he says, well, not a lot, because there's a whole lot of avenues that I can access that's perfectly legal to do so, and I'll continue to do it until you make it illegal to do so. Well, that's having your cake and eating it, which is but I can understand why he does it. But in this case, a rebate is doable. They claim it. But it's a bit of egg on face if you're saying you're going to do away with it, but you claim it, and there's this sort of, and I just think, is it a story or is it just own it?
He made it a story.
Yeah.
He made it a story by fluffing around with it, and of course it came just after he'd what they'd ordered and then cancelled a Tesla as his government drive car. He should have just stuck with it and said, "Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. That's the rule. Go with it." I hark back to.
I
Sorry,
think that's the
go
big
ahead.
issue at play here, actually, is that the wider issue is we're trying to demonize EV. So part of our automotive sector, for that matter, if not the public, are trying actively to demonize EVs. And I think all of us in the room here, along with most of our people that are watching, would agree. The issue isn't EVs. The issue that a lot of people have is just how the subsidies are treated, or the if you like, this push, this overt push into something that people aren't necessarily ready for, which I think is probably more of the fear. People just feel like they're being bulldozed in a pathway they're not ready for yet. None of that is the fault of the EV product, which in most cases I'd argue is exceptionally good. The issue is things like the rebates and other bits and pieces as to how they're treated. And for Christopher Luxon, the issue is not whether he claimed the rebate. Of course you're going to claim the rebate. It's there. It's part of the sale process, for God's sake. The salesperson says, right, okay, well, congratulations, welcome to your new Tesla. That's if it's not an Autobot telling you, here's the rebate information, this is the form you fill out, send it away, done, we'll do it for you. But it was not owning it, and the way that it was handled was just, it was poor and poorly handled. And I guess a bit of an own Christopher.
It's time we mainstreamed EVs. There's a real good argument from a New Zealand Inc. perspective to have had discounts for a period of time to give it a kickstart, take the ruck off and all of that. But the longer you keep these things on, the greater the risk of having a divide between the EV and non-EV owners, and then you get all of the ute tax and everything else argument. In my view is, it's time to actually transition that out and mainstream the EVs, and get the EV owners helping to contribute to road maintenance, those potholes that need to be filled, etc. Mainstream it, make it work, and look at other ways of de-incentivizing carbon intensive transport. Hydrocarbon transport is trying to say. And that's where the clean car standard comes in, a careful design of the targets to get more aggressive over time, rather than the rapid that we've got at the moment. But it's just thinking about that policy mix to get it right and get it consistent.
Interesting, I think some of the opposition around it and some of the anti-EV stuff and then going around wouldn't be there if not for COVID, lockdowns, and various other stuff, and the whole American kind of spillover Marat movement, to steal a line from South Park. It was the ute tax, as it was called, was something that was picked up and put into protests alongside vaccine mandates and free waters and all that kind of stuff. It was, got thrown into this omnibus of gripes that people had. But if that other stuff wasn't going on, I'm not sure it would have gotten quite so strong or quite so much screen time.
Well, I'll put the 10 cents worth there, Richard, and I'll say that there's two issues at play. Stop demonizing ICE vehicle owners for a start. If you want to equal the field, David's got it to a T, is just normalize EVs as part of the fleet. And the quickest way you're going to get public buy-in eventually is stop trying to demonize people for wanting to own an ICE vehicle. And that's part of the problem. The more you push people into this is your choice you have to make, the more they're going to resist it. And they're going to resist it a lot more than they did 20 or 30 years ago. And I think there was more of a greater acceptance of, just whatever the government told you. These days, stop telling people what to do. And they might actually do what you want them to do if you stop telling them to do it. And at the under end of the field is for some of the EV sector out there have a bit of a reputation of being a pious bunch of wankers. Well, stop that as well, okay? Normalize it at both ends. You might actually get, am I right? You might get the greater population to accept this as just another and a better pathway forward and buy-in. At the moment, you're like two political parties fighting away here and there, and no one's actually in the middle, and where you need to be is in the middle.
Okay, Graham. In the supermarket car park, I never walk up to people and start telling them they should sell their ute and get an electric vehicle. But 2 to 3 times a month, I'll have some ute driver come up to me and tell me how evil my electric vehicle is and how slaves in the Congo are mining the cobalt that my car doesn't actually have, oddly, and that we should all be driving utes or hydrogen's going to be the way. So as far as demonizing goes, I think there's a little bit going from both sides. But anyway.
Yeah, well, I own a ute, and I can tell you, Richard, I have plenty of people telling me I should get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You
Fair
try
enough.
driving a Mustang, see how far you get. And one of our show sponsors,
because it runs out
I
of
do
fuel
believe,
quickly.
I care about our planet, Graham.
It goes from Wellington to Auckland on a tank of fuel and a bit further, Richard.
Right. My computer's running out of battery and we're over an hour. So let's quickly run through these last few things. Dealers tackle industry on edge of change. So we went to the AADA, there's been coverage of that on our website. Record turnout of dealers confirmed for the Australian Automotive Dealers Association Convention and Expo, with key themes also having great segments for the New Zealand market as industry scopes its future. They're basically they're really on the edge of electrification over there. That's become a big issue for them. Also the data stuff we talked about earlier. Really good conference. A lot of dealers this year, 1,000 people there, 65% were dealers, which I think is a record kind of split for them. So it was a really good conference. I highly do recommend it. The conference I do recommend, of course, is AutoTalk Live. And I have a little bit of a sneaky tidbit for everyone watching. We have confirmed the date and the location for the next conference. So we are going to be in Auckland City at the Pullman Hotel on November 20, 2023. It's going to be a really big day. Again, lots of great networking, lots of great food, big open bar at the end, and of course, fantastic speakers. I'll take a wild guess, at least two of us are going to be hosting it. And maybe, David, we might need to get up to do a live panel, which we did last time on a very short basis because the internet wasn't great there.
It was a crappy live panel. We'll do better next time. It was a crappy one, but this time we'll do better.
Well, I believe the third member of our live panel had COVID, so that was probably the difficult bit about it. So that's confirmed. We will have all the details for that coming out in the next couple of weeks, and you can start getting your tickets for that, or talk to your friendly sponsors and suppliers about whether they'll buy your ticket and take you along. Now let's switch over to the next story. Audi had a little bit of a faux pas with one of their models. Audi Max got over Q3 registration error. Audi New Zealand is making good to 146 customers who purchased a Q3 SUV, believing it had a 1.5-litre engine with a 7-speed transmission, but was actually powered by a 1.4-litre engine mated to a 6-speed gearbox. According to the NBR, Audi New Zealand dealership and buyers were unaware of the data entry error until it was discovered last month. The NBR reported that a technical data sheet incorrectly identified the vehicles, which claimed fuel consumption of 6.6 litres and 149 grams, whereas it should have been 8 litres and 182 grams. It was an unintended mistake, and they've unreservedly apologised for the error. They've updated their internal processes. They're giving them an extension of their warranty by another 2 years and covering some service and various other things. 5 years of complimentary servicing. Doesn't seem like a lot for what is quite a substantial difference in fuel economy there, but I'm sure hopefully their customers are happy.
This is an issue that does happen from time to time when you're at the end of the production chain and, a long way away from where these vehicles are made, and you rely on the homologation department sending you the right information. And it's not the first time this has happened. In my 10 years, I've seen, when I was in the role, I saw this happen probably a little bit too often. But what I will do is I will commend European Motors and Glyn Tulloch for the way in which they front-footed us. They owned it, and they said, yep, there's a little bit of cost here. This is what we're going to do to try and ameliorate that. And that's the right way to do it. You just come right out, you apologise, you wear it, and then you say, this is what we're going to do to help. I think that was a good approach. Is it enough? Time will tell, but I think Glyn has really approached this, I think, very professionally.
Yes, no, that's right. Now, last story for the day, a little bit of a lighter one, and that is that Vero is now going gender neutral on car insurance. And I don't want to get into any great debate here, but this is interesting. Vero Insurance is now gender neutral around its car insurance. The insurer says it will no longer capture a driver's gender for personal car insurance products. Just announced they were working towards removing gender-based factors from pricing and underwriting on car insurance products in late 2021, and that process may take up to 18 months. Previously, gender was captured in a binary sense, but it no longer accurately represents our Vero customer base, says Vero Consumer Executive General Manager Jane Brewer. Now, this is an interesting one. Totally really not for the dealers, but fun anyway. I know how terrible I was when I was a young, testosterone-filled teenager with my Datsun 120Y and my Triumph Herald. And I feel sorry for those careful young lady drivers who have to pay for the mistakes of that segment of the market now.
I
Graham?
couldn't agree more, Richard. I'm going to show my 55-year-old colours here and say, oh, for Christ's sakes, really?
I suggest the big loser in this situation is teenage or early 20s woman, unfortunately.
Or anybody else.
Punishing them severely.
Teenage boys, we suck at it. When it comes to driving, we suck at it. We really do. Nothing's changed. And it will not change. We deserve to be punished for that.
Yes.
So my question is, are the insurance rates different between the various genders? And if not, and I've never known there to be a difference, if not, then this is a really sensible move, because I've often questioned, why do they need to know my gender? Unless there is a material reason why they need to know it, be damned, why should they know? I'm an insured person, they just should know my name.
Once you pass a certain age, yeah, I think they are the same. But I certainly know back when I was under 25 as a male, if I called up most mainstream insurance companies and said, hi, I'm Richard, I'm 23 and have a Toyota BB with giant wheels, the phone would go click.
But if you called and said, hello, my name is Rachel, I have a Nissan Micra I'd like to insure, I'm sure they'd take you on with that in a heartbeat. I've just been doing, well, not just, but last year organised insurance in my son on his first car, which, true to form, he's just blown up, but that's what you get for being 16. But yeah, gender was a big part of it. And they asked the question, and I'm pretty sure our rate, which we got, reflected that. And I understand why. I get why. I don't have an issue with it. At the end of the day, insurance is a business like any other business, and it has to factor in because on the flip side of it, if I'm a sensible motorist in my 40s with an immaculate track record and I own a sensible vehicle in a sensible part of town, I expect to pay less, and I expect to be able to pay less to provide the information that will allow my insurer to let me pay less. So there's a flip to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to say, good on you, Vero.
Yep. Look, it's progress, and young males, you're winning. You can go and apply for insurance again. Right, look, that's it for this week. It's been a big one. So much news coming. Thank you so much for joining me, Graham and David. Now, interestingly, while we were online, I got an email officially through the NZTA saying that the Dome Valley is going to be closed until next week. So there you go. The main highway to Northland, to an entire region of New Zealand, is closed for a relatively minor rain event, not a major storm or anything, for 5 or 6 days by the time we get to the end of it.
Hey, I just got a thought. You know that light rail thing that a former minister was so keen on that went through his electorate, and another former prime minister that went through their electorate as well that are no longer involved in Parliament? How much money was that again? How much of that would it cost to build to finish the expressway through, if not to Tihana, but all the way through to Whangarei?
Is it $14.2 billion? You can buy a lot of roads for that.
No, it was last month, David. Keep up, but let me have a 14 by now.
And the Northern Motorway is a public-private partnership that they could slap a toll on, so it could get even better than that. So, yeah. Anyway. Right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Hello.